Great. Okay. Cool. Well, thanks everyone that has come to this session. So, Product Fundamentals is one of the two series that Code are putting together, and this is more focused around the community of practitioners, like and I guess us sharing our skills and expertise to you guys. So I'm doing this session around design thinking and design doing, and this is what I do day to day. So hopefully it's of interest to you all. I thought I'd just cover off a few things. So if anybody doesn't know about Code, hopefully you do because you're here, but essentially like this is our kind of ethos, and it's kind of fundamental to, I guess, design thinking. Like we call ourselves a product studio, and we make things, and by virtue we change things, and this is what we kind of do day to day. So we're helping businesses getting ready for the future, and I think design thinking and the action of designing is obviously very integral to that and helping us make things better. So a few house rules, I guess, for the session. In terms of questions, I'm gonna obviously present. I can't see your faces because I'm on a one screen, but Yayan is going to be hosting, and he'll kind of look out for that. But if we can have the questions put into the chat, into the Teams chat, so I think you should be able to see like a little icon in the top, little chat icon if you don't know Teams, and you can just type them into the question chat area, and we can cover off some questions at the end. That'll be good. The talk should be about 35, maybe 40 minutes, so I'll make some time for questions at the end. It's obviously being recorded, so some of the detail in the slides you'll be able to kind of like rewatch it and pause it and look at it. So I might be going through at a bit of a higher pace on some of the things. And then if you can keep your microphone off, it helps me, so I'm not distracted by random dog barking and things like that. But if you want to have your video on, feel free to show your faces. That's absolutely fine. Cool. So I'll start. So I'll crack on. So I guess the session, what I'm going to be talking about is part of our product fundamentals sort of series of talks, and these are two condensed. There's two talks around design thinking and design doing, and what I've done is sort of condense it a little bit to kind of share with you today. So some top level, I guess, concepts of what it is that we do. So we do have like more detailed presentations. If you're interested, you can get in touch. But this hopefully give you like a flavour of what we do. So I'll just start really. So I'm aware that design thinking can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, and I think sometimes it's like some people think it's just about post-it notes on a screen, or people think it has a bit of a bad rep because people think it's democratizing design and designers aren't doing design and all that kind of like negative stuff. But actually what we're here is about all the good stuff, and hopefully I'll be able to kind of communicate that to you. So it's not a new thing, design thinking, actually. Like humans have been doing design thinking from the Stone Age, as this suggests. So ultimately it's about a group of people thinking about problems and arriving at solutions together and iterating. So we're literally not reinventing the wheel. We've been doing it from forever. But I suppose it's become popular, maybe in the digital world or even the physical product world, because of these guys at IDEO. They essentially packaged up human-centered design into something that businesses could kind of understand, which is design thinking. And they kind of wanted it to become more known for the action of designing rather than the outcome. So we often talk about design as the verb. It's about the process of doing design and understanding problems and solving them. And the thing that you see at the end is a result of, I suppose, lots of work up to that point. So you'll often see these diagrams. So the double diamond at the top, and then I guess the one underneath is what you might traditionally see as design thinking, which we'll cover up a little bit later. And for Code, this looks a lot like this. So we go through a series of stages of like going from lo-fi to hi-fi. So we'll be doing research. So this is an example of Center Parcs, actually. So we're doing contextual research, going on site, looking, observing humans, and then thinking about how digital can kind of improve that experience, and sketching and testing and working our way through to things in people's hands, like high fidelity. So it's all about, the process is all about enabling human-centered design. I guess the reason why we do it, and why we strongly believe in it, and why we kind of evangelize about it, if you like, to the extent of people tell you to stop talking about design thinking. It just helps us with our product teams and when we're making stuff. So like helps us reduce waste. So we know we're not building and engineering the wrong things, because engineering is expensive. It builds confidence into our ideas for us and the clients. Like we're more confident in that. It helps us to harness collaborative kind of innovation and creativity from everywhere. So pockets of within the business, like all different areas, we can kind of gather ideas and collaborate together. It does make us more commercially focused. We can learn fast. Fail quickly and learn fast isn't often a term you get to hear, but that's about quick iteration and learning about failures so we can build and improve. And ultimately, it's about building empathy for users. So obviously, as a design professional, our lens is always more focused to users, but obviously we need to think about the business and the feasibility of stuff. But it's about building empathy and designing for customers, not just purely for businesses. Like they both have to meet in the middle. And it's obviously popular because organizations are using it as like consultation methods, like management consultancies are using it as methods to kind of harness innovation in businesses. So it's really just grown a life of its own. But ultimately, actually, when you boil it down, it's experts and people doing working together. So there's some principles that underpin design thinking, which ultimately is about being user focused. It's about problem framing, so finding out problems but framing them in a good way. Collaboration is core to it. Experimentation and not being afraid to experiment and try things and learn. And then obviously ultimately then visualizing concepts and prototypes and ideas. And then there's mindsets that sit under that. So I think I'm not going to talk about all that because it takes ages. So you can come back and look at the video and kind of look at that. I think that's for you, if you can take that away. So really, when we say what is design thinking, I kind of like broke it down into like some statements that you can say what it is. So it's an approach to problem solving, which is maybe what you often hear, but actually it changes how businesses develop new products and services. So like rather than just dreaming up an idea and putting it out there, they're evolving it through prototyping and learning and experimenting. So this is an example of how you would go from like a standard pattern of a cutting board, chopping board, like a UX, let's say that was UX pattern on the top left, like then the bottom right is the innovation, the change. Next is a set of creative thinking tools. And I think this is the bit that maybe becomes contentious. So people think that, oh, you're just letting anyone in a business do design thinking and we're not going to get anything of use out of it. But actually, I guess that's the point. It kind of democratizes design so that everyone can take part in it. But it's always the job of the designer and the professionals to kind of design that program and bring that together. But essentially, it's a package of creative tools that non-designers can use, and we can invite them into our process. Yeah, and it's collaborative, and it's about conversation, and it's about doing things together. And actually, this is another difficult for organizations to get their head around. So it's ultimately a change in how we make the decisions. So it's like quite a shift in cultural changes. So a lot of the times when we're doing workshops or things like that, we'd be ideating, and then we invite the room to kind of dot vote and say what they think, rather than the stakeholder at the top or like gut feel. It's more collaborative. That can make it difficult for some people. But that's ultimately like a thing that you have to think about and reconcile. It's the group making decisions. But actually, it's really good for digital products. Like again, it's like it fits with agile methodologies. Like you can do things at pace. And with it, like design sprints can work in weeks. You can continually learn. It makes things. You can break design down into smaller chunks and things like that. And it can be measurable, and you can get real-time access to mass data and usage and understand how people are using your designs and things like that. So it's really good for digital products, and that's why it's kind of just exponentially like leaped in the last sort of maybe 5 years or so. So that's maybe a bit of a history lesson. You might find that interesting or not, but that's why we do design thinking, because of those things. And if I just step into a little bit about I suppose like concepts that you need to understand when you're doing design thinking. You're not it's not just you're going from problem to solution. Like you're not just on like a monorail going through a process. You need to be mindful that you're doing this. So you're divergent thinking and you're convergent thinking. So that's when we talk about ideation. So you're thinking big and thinking wide and thinking about ideas, and then you're honing in. So that's a cycle that you always do. So think big, think focus. So that gets really good ideas out on the table. And then the other kind of concept is that we're always in either problem space or solution space, and we go from left to right. So we're uncovering insight and framing problems, and then we're going into what could we make and what should it make. So that's the core concepts, really. So that's divergent. Divergent's all about creating choices. Convergent is always about making choices. And then problem space is moving through to problem, insight, through to like, what do we make? And this is the double diamond framework. So if anyone's familiar with that, it's the design council. They kind of like looked at thousands and thousands of designers and looked at what the common kind of things that they do, and they kind of came up with this double diamond framework, and it fits very nicely with design thinking. So it's about, you have a challenge, you discover some things, define some things, develop, deliver an outcome. And that's probably what, if you search design thinking, those words would come up. But it fits very nicely with the double diamond around problem space, solution space. And that's the kind of what it looks like. So that's like the design thinking bit of the talk, I suppose. It's like, ultimately, it's some guiding principles and a framework and a process. But actually the design doing bit is the bit of that's difficult, that you don't necessarily know how to do, and that's where it goes wrong or can go wrong. So what we've done at Code is essentially like defined like a set of like go-to methods that we always use, that we know are good and robust and tried and tested. These aren't things that we've invented, but we know that they're valuable and useful in this process. So for example, contextual observation we know is important, and we've got a standard way of doing it, and we have templates of like how we gather insights and what we look for and things like that. So we've standardized some of the methods that we do at Code to make sure that we're repeatable, that we're always retaining a good quality of standard. So that kind of like, I suppose if you're familiar with design systems, that's like your atoms. So like we've got a base point of methods that we always use that makes our practice really good. But the first challenge that you'll always have when thinking about a design program or trying to solve a problem or engaging on a project with a client and trying to like think, so how do I apply design thinking to a project or a problem, is understanding the scope and framing what it is. And this is what we use. It's more of a project management tool actually, but it actually is really helpful to kind of frame what you're trying to do. So often, I guess there's 4 quadrants. So there's like paint by numbers, so where we're really clear about what we need to do. So there's things that you know and things that you don't know. So if it's like you've been asked to like, I guess, design a landing page, a PPC landing page, you know how to do a landing page. It's like there's loads of resources out there. It's really simple. It's kind of like paint by numbers exercise, and you kind of accept that's what it is. Versus navigating the fog, where it's like the brief's really unclear, you don't know what the problems are, you don't really know what the solution's going to be. It's really ambiguous and woolly. A woolly problem, let's say, you might have heard that term. It's really foggy, so therefore you're going to have to design a different process. So you're going to have to design some research, and you're going to have to design some process of ideation. But understanding and agreeing up front what kind of project is this helps you then design the process, which is this. So knowing that you've got a really woolly, foggy problem at the start then lets you know, well, I need to do a load of stuff in the problem space. I need to do some diary studies, or I need to do some kind of on-site research, some customer interviews, whatever it is. And then I'll need to like hone those down onto what they're doing on a website. And then we need to then do some ideation, and then we need to do some kind of testing. Like knowing the project enables you to design the process. And a lot of the challenges we have as design professionals in Code is process design as a discipline. Designing the things you do to get the answer you need at the end is the challenge that designers have at Code, and that's why we've got the tools in place to help us do that. Design sprints is another good thing that we use. Like we use a lot of them. We don't overuse them because it can get really like mentally draining. Like we pick the right things to use a design sprint for. So generally like a good foggy problem or like a contained problem we'll use a design sprint for. But this is essentially like combining agile and design thinking into a process, and that's why it's another reason why it's exploded. But you can definitely like adopt design sprints to kind of embed design thinking into your organization as a starting point, but then you kind of break away from design, the restraints a design sprint gives you. But ultimately, like design thinking is about trying to do this. So you're going from some hopes and leaps of faith on the left to having confidence in your idea. And actually, everyone just expects it to be this kind of really flat, linear process of like, I'm going from left to right, la la la, going through a process, everything's easy. But actually you're going from like happy to sad moments. Like it's messy, it's really messy. Like you think you've got a really good process designed, and then something will go wrong, you'll have insight from customers that say everything's crap. Then you have to rework your process, do some different research, replan. So it's like nothing is ever straightforward, nothing's a linear process. So I think it's kind of want to kind of get across the fact that I suppose the design thinking framework is a guide, but actually it's really hard to kind of navigate through those things. It's not just autopilot, do the next, and then hopefully you'll get a great idea at the end. You need constant thinking and looking at, so the next stage I need to do this for the thing I need to learn or the design I need to do. So I think that's a good sort of slide to show your stakeholders, like, yeah, it is going to get messy. Things are going to go wrong. Your customers are going to say this idea is rubbish, but that's the point. We need to learn about some things, so then we can go on that journey together, and then at the end we'll be confident about what we've done. So that's the process of how we apply design thinking at Code, like the stages and the frameworks and how we think, going from problem to solution. And then I'm just going to talk through some like practical design things that we do to kind of help us do that. I thought worth mentioning, actually, I suppose, because obviously designers are doing this at Code, and the challenge that designers have within, I guess, organizations of like shepherding people through that design thinking journey. Because I guess UX designers and product designers, or whatever, I guess we've been like conditioned to believe that we're the center of the world, or at least within the organization's world, like UX is at the center of everything. And if you just Google UX design or user-centered design, it's always UX in the middle, and everything else is around the edge, like business is at the edge, like visuals, like functionality or prototyping, but UX is in the middle. It's all about you, but actually it's not. when you're working with businesses and organizations, leadership's in the middle. They're making the decisions, and you're just one of multiple like teams and functions within an organization that is trying to affect change or make something. So you have to learn to work with all those teams and people. You're not at the middle, and it's not going to be easy. So actually, what you have to figure out is connecting with engineering better. Talking to the support teams from the companies, talking to marketing and sales, and like it's the design's job to make the connections, but not be kind of naive enough to think that you're in the middle and everything's going to go swimmingly. So that's maybe just a point that we kind of highlight to our designers as well. So I'm going to just talk about, I guess, some of the things that we have to do as designers to kind of communicate and embed the things that we do within the problem space, so the problem solution space. So obviously, when we're doing research, we need to create new insights, and that's often quantitative and qualitative. Like you should hopefully be familiar with that. So that's data type stuff, and then more like thoughts and feelings kind of stuff, like interviews, for example, would be an example, versus like GA, like what people are actually doing and the numerical kind of statistics of that. But then there's also another angle of like behavior and attitudinal, so like observing and quantifying what people do versus like what they say. And this is kind of like a mix of all the research methods and how they kind of like track against those things. So often you might just do, we're just going to do some A/B tests and analytics, but then you get a really narrow view of maybe what a customer's doing or thinking. So like you can see what they're doing, but you don't know why they're doing it. So then you might have to do some depth interviews or a diary study or something like that. So it's like picking a selection of methods, research methods, to get a more rounded view of what customers are doing, and plotting that on the design process of why you're doing it and when and what for and what purpose. So obviously you might do a diary study because it's open discovery and you're trying to just find open problems, versus an A/B test research method in the solution space because you're trying to hone in on what the right solution might be. But yeah, I guess the challenge and the skill for designers at Code is that process design, is picking the right thing at the right time for the right reason. It's probably a good mantra, I would say. But ultimately, yeah, it's about varying your research between quant, qual, attitudinal, and behavioural, so you get a really rounded view of like what's the customer doing, what they need, and what are our opportunities. And then obviously we have to then communicate that insight. And a lot of what we do at Code is mapping, lots of different maps. We sometimes get ourselves tied in knots about stipulating what kind of map it is for what kind of purpose, but ultimately it's a visual graph or visual representation of insights. So it might be an empathy map, which enables us to demonstrate our understanding about customers, like groups of customers and how they think and that kind of thing. Or it could be customer journey map, so we're really interested on how a customer gets to a specific experience, for example. Or if it's an experience map, we might explore that out a little more. So we might be trying to understand where digital could help in a wider service experience. So for example, let's say it's a customer looking for a bike or a bicycle, for example. We might be thinking about how digital can help the delivery stage, or once they've got the bike, like can we rather than it just being the lead and conversion experience, could you create an app to help them learn how to cycle better, for example. Like, it's understanding that how a customer is going to find that product, use that product, and kind of maybe come back to you as an organization. And then a service blueprint takes that layer and then looks in depth within the organization. So it's about how does the organization deliver the experience for the customers. So we're looking at departments. So like, what does the marketing team do? What does the sales team do? What does customer services do? What technical systems are they using that enables the service? Where does the data get stored? So it's like, look, it's really like diving deep into the organization, even to the point where you're looking at people and their mindsets. So we did some work with Ombudsman, and we found out that the call center needed better scripts so that they could be more empathetic to people complaining about problems, and listen for trigger words about vulnerability. So service design lets us step into that to enable us to deliver better customer experiences. So that's really exciting evolution for design at Code, and design thinking is like stepping into service a bit more, which is really cool. And these are some of the artifacts that we create often for our clients to kind of very much like an infographic. It can be used for stakeholder presentations. It can be used to kind of frame problems, to highlight what they're making, what customers doing and what business isn't doing or enabling, or like, it's very much an infographic. But actually the objective of mapping really is not necessarily the output itself. It's the process of shared understanding, really. It's the insight that you gain from it. So often you might say, oh, we need a map, like we're going to charge for a map, or we're going to make a map. And it's not the map that's the value. It's the work that you've done to have those insights, and the collaborative exercises, the conversations you've had, the shared understanding of the problem between you and the customer and the client, the partners. That's the important bit. The map's like just the thing at the end that lets you refer back to it. So I think that's, I guess, an important point to raise. So once you've obviously like learned some stuff in the problem space, and you've communicated those problems, and you've honed in on the things that you're going to do, you've then got to start thinking about solutions, and like how to make stuff. And this is one of our models that we use quite a lot. I guess when you're getting into screen-based design, I suppose, we use this persuasion model quite a lot. And it basically, it helps you kind of work your way through, like thinking about, you need a base point of usability, then you need to build trust in the thing that you're making so customers want to use it. you need to emotionally connect with them. And once they kind of got those tiers done, you're then able to then, I guess, like motivate them to do the thing that the business needs and also potentially what the customer might need. So we use that quite a lot. Usability heuristics, you might hear this a lot from a like pure play UX kind of thing. There's loads out there. This is like Jacob Nielsen's 10 usability heuristics, but we use these things like as part of making sure that we're creating design systems and interfaces that are usable, I guess, and common to other websites. So a customer doesn't just use your website; they use loads of websites with other companies, and so it's about trying to maintain like a standard, buying into the idea that there's a standard kind of usability best practice across the internet, and we're trying to kind of like level it up, but also make sure that there's commonality and repeatability for customers. And then obviously there's cognitions, so like mental bias, how people think mentally, I guess. These can be linked to like persuasion techniques, but it's like just understanding how people think, and then you can think about designing those things. So social proofing is an obvious one that everyone knows about. So when a customer sees people like them engaging with that product, they kind of feel more reassured that that thing's for them, for example. So that's a good kind of like set of principles that you can apply to your design. And I guess the last one I think actually is prototyping, which is directly linked to design thinking and human-centered design. It's all about action focused, making things to learn. And we prototype all the time within design phase, like lo-fi to hi-fi. It helps us align our thinking. It creates new insight, reduces risks, all those good things that I talked about earlier about design thinking and human-centered design. Prototyping is ultimately the fundamental cornerstone of being able to do that. We can make prototypes as research tools, and we can make prototypes as solution tools. So like we could make an artifact to kind of prompt conversation with users when we're doing interviews. So that could be like a thing that we make that helps us gather insights. It could be a prototype that helps us make decisions. You know, there's opportunity for making things all the way from start to finish. So often when we say we're going to make a prototype and you'll craft it, you make it high fidelity and you think it's the final thing, but actually it's just a thing that you make to learn and you throw it away. And that's kind of our ethos. Obviously, until you get to the end where you're actually making the final thing. But yeah, the design process is very kind of like, can be quite throwaway, and we need to think a bit like that. These are some examples of prototypes. Like we see like a visual concept as a prototype almost. It's a communication prototype. It gets quite meta, but that's what we kind of think about it. Or it's designs, so like high fidelity designs that you can put into like a screen. You can use tools like Principle to make stuff like demonstrate interactivity, and then also we can make prototypes to kind of fake interaction, I suppose. So this was an example for the BBC where we're trying to like understand how people might react to live TV. So obviously we couldn't make a prototype because we couldn't demonstrate live TV. We couldn't pull live TV into a prototype, so we just played some live football and put some acetate over to demonstrate liking and all that kind of like different ways that someone could interact with, and that was like a really lo-fi, quick, easy way to kind of simulate how you could maybe feedback within a live setting. So there's loads of like, you have to get creative with your prototypes, I guess is the point there. But ultimately it's about trying to design or rendering the intent. So like trying to get to as close as you can to what someone could do in the solution space, or what the thing is. Like you could be testing propositions, like business propositions in the problem space, like learning about desirability. But this is a term that you hear a lot. So yeah, so if you take anything away from this and forget everything, remember prototyping. That's like a good start. But that's it in the terms of the talk. I've probably talked really quickly and talked about a load of stuff. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see questions, and I thought it'd be really useful for you to ask questions, because that's probably a better way for you to maybe learn. So that's me. but you're on mute. Yeah.
Don't think there's been any questions in the chat, so unless anyone's got any, I got a question, Colin. In terms of sort of like the past year in remote working, how have these principles sort of like evolved for like your teams, and sort of like what tools have sort of been vital to sort of helping you do all this?
Yeah, so obviously, like collaboration was the first thing to take a hit with remote working, because we're all in your own living rooms. You're not in a physical space. I still want that to happen soon, but ultimately the tools that we've used to kind of fill the gap and has been a benefit actually is things like whiteboarding tools. So we use Miro quite a lot to do our kind of workshops and collaborative exercises. So it's like a virtual wall, basically. I'm sure you've all potentially used it. It's really good for like just getting everything into one place. It's a good place to have like all your resources all available. You can see it all. It's good for workshops and inviting other people into your space. But personally, I find it really difficult when you need to kind of like zoom out and think big, let's say, or like analyze everything. Like because it's in a screen, it sort of almost like narrows your brain a little bit. So it's like I still prefer being able to like put everything on a wall and just sit back, look at it all, observe everything in one place, and just have somebody there to chat to. We use like Teams video calling and whiteboarding tools to kind of like replace that, and it does do a really good job. But I guess it depends how your brain thinks, I suppose, as well. Some people might find it really simple to use, whereas I kind of need that sit back and let it muse kind of like moment. But yeah, that's the main challenges we've had, I would say.
Hopefully soon you'll be back with your whiteboards in the office.
Yeah. I think the thing that it has helped is like obviously when you do like an exercise in physical form, you're writing on post-its, that you've then got all the time to write that post-it into some sort of digital format to then present back. So what it does do is cuts the inefficiency of that process. It cuts out, you've already got it digitized, so that it's good for that. It's brilliant for that. Yeah.
And there has been another question. Can you see the chat box, Col?
Hang on, I'm just going to open it now. Actually, yeah.
Lisa's asked the question.
So there's a lot in there. Some really useful tools to use, bring design thinking to life. Interested to hear a bit more about how you use cognition's heuristics and the persuasion model when designing and speaking to clients. So we use that a lot in our early stage evaluations. So when we're looking at and doing expert reviews on like digital interfaces, we'll use that framework to kind of assess how well it's working. And that's generally a designer expert-led kind of review. So we'll use we'll frame our review around like usability of these things. We'll kind of go, so there's some trust elements in this, and we'll frame it around that, and then we'll kind of say, based on a scenario that we know you need to kind of improve these things to nudge people along the journey or the funnel. In terms of like cognition heuristics and things like that, we bake those into those principles into our solutions, and we'll kind of like, if we're like doing it like for the BBC, for example, in the last example that I showed you around the prototypes around social engagement, we'll pick out some of the cognitions around kind of being around others. So we'll say like, this is really important for social proofing and get engagement. So we do these things to kind of help answer those things. So you can be quite literal, or you can just use it as part of your design process. So that you don't have to be scientific in your explanation about it. It's just part of design. But if you feel it's really important to the solution, then you can communicate that as part of your deck, I guess, or your presentation. But we use it a lot in the early stages, and then more in the right more towards the end when we're really crafting the solutions. So the second question, I hope that answered your question, by the way. So the next one was, how do you work with clients who are difficult or might enforce their own design thoughts on the project, go against the research? Yeah, that's a really great question. I guess so we get that all the time, actually. Yeah. So a lot of the workshops that we do enables us to kind of take that up, mitigate against that. Like we often start a relationship with something that we call day zero. So right from the start, we seek to understand the kind of key stakeholders and the influential hippos, let's say, in the room that are going to like just ignore everything. So we kind of like put our marker on these people right at the start, and understand why they might be difficult, and what they need out of it. And then also when they've got the whole team on board and thinking about and believing about research, it's much harder for them to kind of go against that. We use evidence, so we'll invite them into usability testing, for example, to sort of see what customers are actually saying. We'll replay videos, we'll put quotes in front of them so that they can see the research in real life, and then demonstrate how that impacts maybe on the bottom line. For example, like if your customers are not liking your brand, let's say, or your experience or your product, that means X on your commercially. So like you got to, I guess, speaking their language is another technique as well. Like designers are having to speak more business language to kind of get their research and their ideas through the door, because ultimately, like some stakeholders, let's say, that just care about, I just want a shiny new website, and don't care about research or the effort you put in, and the process. They don't care about design thinking. They just want an outcome at the end. Like that's okay. You don't need to kind of like hit them with the design thinking hammer. You just do it yourself, and invite some people into it, and then go, here you go. Here's a great website, and we've done all this stuff, and we know it'll work really well. Like you don't have to get them to like it. You do it. You do the research as part of your program, and just do it is often what we do. I think hopefully I've answered your question there. Some tips. Oh, what's involved with day zero? So maybe we do another talk on that, but essentially it's a day's worth of a workshop. So often 10 till 4. We'll have the areas we cover. Essentially is like we'll look at what does the business need. So like we'll talk about business goals, challenges, frustrations of like where they're trying to get to. So like really unpack the business and the brief and why they're engaging, why now, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve. So really get them to kind of play out that, and then we'll step into customers. So what do you know about your customers? We'll often do like empathy map exercises to get them to step into the mindset of customers, so they kind of start understanding and thinking and feeling like a customer. So it's setting the groundwork really. We'll then kind of collaboratively map through potentially what their customer journey is like. So we're getting to understand what they know about customer journey, and then we'll maybe do like more future thinking. So we'll do like visionary exercise around, so what's the ideal future look like in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years time. So we're basically unpacking the brief a little bit, setting the groundwork for how we want to work together, setting the groundwork for being user focused and how important users are, and then also capturing that and giving them the opportunity to say, this is what I want to be, this is what I want the business to be in 5 years time, and we can kind of like work towards that. And it's really like a kick-off workshop, I suppose, but it sets up a good relationship, sets up what we believe in, and we understand them as well and their fears and their hopes and frustrations. Yeah, that's a day zero.
Fantastic. I think that is actually 40 minutes on the dot, Col.
Cool.
So thanks everyone for joining. Like Col said, this is a session that's usually split into 2. So it has been condensed quite a bit. So if anyone does want more information or more resources, feel free to get in touch with Col. Where can people find you, Col? On LinkedIn and email you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Colin Preston is probably my more active space. I don't really use Twitter, to be fair. Yeah, so that's probably a good place to go to. Yeah,
and these are monthly events. So the next one will be about sort of delivery and how that forms part of the product's life cycle. So that will be next month. So thanks everyone for joining, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Thank you.